I was on a tour bus cruising east from Estonia. The bus stopped for tense border formalities at Narva. Then our group was across the river and into Putin country, bound for the imperial capital of old Tsarist Russia, St. Petersburg. I was en route to see the new face of Russia while absorbing her culture. Few poets can match Alexander Pushkin. No one has probed the human soul like Fyodor Dostoevsky. Anna Karenina by Tolstoy is immortal. I enjoyed Dead Souls by Gogol, The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, the engaging memoir Speak, Memory by Vladimir Nabokov. On Netflix before the trip, I streamed Dr. Zhivago, the film of Boris Pasternak's masterpiece. I could not forget the Soviet Gulag abuses recounted by inmate Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I remembered the skies of gray in the Russian plays by Chekhov, Three Sisters, and the others. On iTunes, I bought the stirring symphonies of Rimsky-Korsakov, Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, Mussorgsky, Shostakovich, Prokofiev. I researched, too, the ballet genius of George Balanchine, Nijinsky, Anna Pavlova, Maya Plisetskaya, Nureyev, Baryshnikov. And what a history to be examining close up! The first Tsars from the Rurik dynasty, starting in the 9th century, rulers like Boris Godunov, Ivan the Terrible, and the 304 years of the Romanovs. Peter the Great, and Catherine the Great, and Alexander the First, who beat Napoleon in 1812. Alexander II, who freed the serfs and was assassinated anyway. Nicholas II, killed with his family in 1918 by Lenin's revolutionary Bolsheviks. By the time Joseph Stalin succeeded Lenin, aristocrats had fled. Igor Sikorsky, who invented the helicopter. Nabokov, who invented Lolita. Stalin had rival Leon Trotsky murdered in 1940 and died himself in 1953, succeeded by Malyankov, Bulganin and Khrushchev alone, Brezhnev with the eyebrows in the period of stagnation, Yuri Andropov, Konstantin Chernenko, and Mikhail Gorbachev, whose glasnost and perestroika led to the December 1991 collapse of the USSR. Boris Yeltsin, the downsized Russian Federation's first president, was a drunkard who presided over a chaotic shift to free markets and a giveaway of socialist government enterprises to oligarch buddies. Former KGB agent Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin has been Russia's leader since 2000, with mixed results in an up-and-down economy. Putin brought the prestigious Winter Olympics to Sochi in early 2014, but Russia's trove of medals turned out to be the result of Soviet-style doping. Putin boosted his popularity by seizing the Crimea from Ukraine later in 2014. He started a thinly disguised war to break eastern Ukraine away from the pro-Western Kiev government. Putin cracked down on the news media and the internet, even on rockers like Pussy Riot. He poisoned perceived enemies. He messed with the 2016 U.S. election, doing his best to elect admirer Donald Trump. Investigations go on, with retaliatory U.S. sanctions on 24 Putin cronies and Russia's closing of the American consulate in St. Petersburg. I shrugged off all the troubling news, ending my cultural preparations by drinking lots of stolichnaya, cultivating a taste for caviar, slurping borscht, and even taking lessons in the demanding Gopak. What, you don't believe I can do that? We reach St. Petersburg, Peter the Great's window to the west on the Baltic Sea and the Neva River. Russia's capital from 1703 to 1918, the handsome city of canals, long known as the Venice of the North, now has 5 million people, named St. Petersburg, then Petrograd, then Leningrad. The city is St. Petersburg again. Nevsky Prospect is Main Street, the domain of shoppers and of distinctive old department stores. The city was celebrating the 315th anniversary of its founding by Peter the Great, who won the swampy shores from Sweden. Catherine the Great ordered up the bronze horseman, Peter Triumphant, symbol of St. Petersburg. Newlyweds have wedding pictures taken with him. Russia's population has shrunk to 142 million, the level of the U.S. in 1940. Economist Sergei Akopov told us that income inequality is higher than before the 1917 revolution. Still, in the sprawling nation of 11 time zones and 160 minority groups, where many seniors are nostalgic for Soviet times, people think Putin is making Russia great again. Russians believe that the Crimea was properly theirs all along, and Western sanctions have little impact, Akopov said. Once isolated, Russia is very much a part of the globalized world. Autos are mostly Western. Even the Cyrillic letters do not take long to grasp. Restaurant, for example. The word for stop is stop. St. Petersburg's 18th century skyline is largely intact, with the glaring exception of the 1,500-foot-high Gazprom headquarters, tallest tower in Europe. The natural gas monopoly's oligarch Alexei Miller is on the U.S. sanctions list. On a stroll from our hotel, my wife Irma Hawkins and I found Soviet reminders, though the only sign of a police state was a gaggle of police cadets. Banners promoted Zabivanka, gold medalist, mascot of the June and July 2018 Football World Cup, staged in 11 Russian cities. This gift shop did not offer Zabivankas, but there were plenty of fake Fabergé eggs, Matryoshka nesting dolls, and vodka bottles, plus coffee mugs featuring Putin and Trump. Our hotel was on Rimsky-Korsakov Street, and here was the composer of Scheherazade himself, decorated with pigeons. On a nearby canal, the winter house where Vladimir Nabokov grew up. On the Moika River embankment, the Yusupov Palace, where in 1916, Prince Felix Yusupov, richest man in Russia, led a cabal in killing Grigory Rasputin. As Russian soldiers were dying in World War I, the charismatic holy man had grown disturbingly influential, with Nicholas and Alexandra and their 5 children. St. Petersburg then was a city of immense private palaces like Yusupov's, built on the backs of peasant serfs on vast estates. The Mariinsky Palace now houses the city legislature. Hometown boy Vladimir Putin used to be deputy mayor. The Sheremetyev Palace was owned by an aristocrat shunned by society after marrying one of his 200,000 serfs, an opera singer at his private theater. The Mikhailovsky Palace now houses the Russian Museum. And you've eaten beef stroganoff, created by the elite owner of Stroganov Palace. Monuments abound. At the National Library, a tribute to Catherine the Great, who seized power in a coup against her dimwit husband. The tragic Pushkin, who died in a duel at age 38, has his own beloved statue. The once dominating Russian Orthodox Church, suppressed by the Soviets, has made a comeback. Putin encourages the religion. Patriarch Kirill lends Putin loyal political support. Restored onion-domed Orthodox churches like the Nikolsky Cathedral are everywhere in St. Petersburg. St. Isaac's, one of the world's biggest Russian Orthodox cathedrals, was built to glorify Alexander I's Napoleonic victory. Isaac was a 3rd century monk in the Balkans. During the 900-day Nazi siege of Leningrad, when 1.5 million died, St. Isaac's grew cabbage for the starving populace. Kazan Cathedral commemorates the fall of Kazan, the Tatars' capital, to Ivan the Terrible in 1552. Tatar horsemen and the Mongolian Golden Horde before them had been plaguing Muscovy for centuries. Marshal Mikhail Kutuzov, who chased Napoleon back to Paris, is buried here. The Church on the Spilled Blood, a mournful monument to Tsar Alexander II. In the 8th attempt on his life, he was killed by a bomb on this very spot in 1881. The death of the great liberator triggered pogroms, not that the Cossacks needed the excuse. The communists turned the church with its 8,000 yards of mosaics into a potato warehouse. The most historic church is on Rabbit Island, where Peter the Great located the Peter and Paul Fortress behind walls 24 feet thick to start his city. A prison held Peter's treasonous son. Dostoevsky was briefly jailed here, too.
Family was dead. She did not.
Local guide Marina Dunayevskaya, whose family survived the wartime siege, described the Peter and Paul Cathedral's outstanding feature: the tomb markers of almost all the Romanov Tsars from 1613 to 1917. The coffins are actually buried 10 feet below. Peter the Great is here with his wife Catherine, and Alexander II with his wife Maria. It's Westminster Abbey for autocrats. A chapel marks the reburials in 1998 of the canonized Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, and daughters Olga, Tatiana, and, yes, Anastasia. Their remains were exhumed in 1991 from a dirt road near Yekaterinburg in the Urals. The bodies of the teenaged Tsarevich Alexei, the hemophilic crown prince, and his sister Maria were found later. They have yet to be reburied, church officials stubbornly questioning whether the skeletons are the right ones. Perhaps most historic of all, Palace Square. The beautiful Winter Palace dates from 1762, designed for the extravagant Empress Elizabeth by the Italian Bartolomeo Rastrelli. Nicholas, having abdicated in February 1917, on an October night the cruiser Aurora boomed the signal. Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace to depose Alexander Kerensky's hapless democratic provisional government. It was the start of the Russian Revolution. Today, the Baroque palace, seldom used by Nicholas and his reclusive German empress, is known chiefly as the Hermitage Museum, top tourist draw in St. Petersburg. Catherine the Great started the art collection. Huge as the Hermitage is, only a fraction of the collection can be displayed at any one time. Currently shown are masterpieces by Da Vinci, El Greco, Raphael, Caravaggio, Rembrandt, and many more. As a cat person, I loved hearing about the 80 cats who live in the Hermitage basement. They have staff to care for them while they keep the palace free of mice.
CBC News, St. Petersburg.
Irma and I broke away from the Hermitage mobs, crossing the square to the General Staff Building, where Nicholas's generals screwed up World War I. The building has been redesigned to display the Hermitage's stupendous collection of Impressionist art. Here are works by Picasso, Cézanne, Gauguin, Monet, Matisse, Renoir, Degas, Mayol, Denis. Outside, Irma was entranced by the white pigeons of an entrepreneur who prodded us to take pictures, then charged us $8. The Mariinsky Ballet is St. Petersburg's renowned company. Ticket prices were sky high, so we settled for the lesser-known Russian ballet at a mere $120. That troupe was performing Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake at the Mikhailovsky Ballet and Opera Theater off Nevsky Prospect. The theater is not as fancy as the Mariinsky, but it is elegant enough, and the dancing was first rate. "45 minutes south to Tsarskoye Selo, the village of the Romanov summer palaces. We toured the Catherine Palace, opened in 1711 for Peter the Great's wife. Their daughter, Empress Elizabeth, who had 16,000 dresses, decorated in style. The famed Amber Room was a gift to Peter from Prussian King Friedrich Wilhelm I. The occupying Nazis stole the priceless amber, still missing. This is a reproduction. Like Nicholas II, most Romanov rulers opted out of living in the Catherine Palace, a shotgun or tunnel-style house lacking bedroom privacy. Using the Catherine only for state ceremonies, they preferred the simpler Alexander Palace. Nikki, Alex, and the kids spent almost all their time here. We were told it was closed for renovations. A tourist took these shots in 2005. Back in town, I had no time to see for myself the restored cruiser Aurora and the Finland station, where Lenin arrived with German help in 1917 to foment the revolution. Germany succeeded in getting Lenin to pull struggling Russia out of the war. Contrails overhead link Moscow with the globe, making St. Petersburg a second city, a flyover city. It was time to leave for the capital, bigger, more diverse, facing more toward the future.
How's to ourselves?
First, a farewell dinner for 4 of the group who would not be going to Moscow. Overseas adventure travel laid on some Roma musicians and dancers.
Our number 8.
Russia's bullet train, the Sapsan, named for the swift peregrine falcon. The train speeded us 394 miles southeast to Moscow in 4 hours. Regular trains take 8 hours, or you can fly. Security at the St. Petersburg station was extremely tight to foil Chechen terrorists. We made it aboard for the run through the verdant countryside.
Those look fairly modern.
Arrival at Leningrad Station in Moscow, where a local tour guide had an opinion on why Westerners should see the sophisticated world capital of 13 million people.
It's a lovely city. It's one of the most interesting and spiritual cities in the world. So there's so much history here, and I'm so thrilled to share all these stories. And I think we have to travel and visit each other, so then we'll better understand each other.
It was fulfilling to walk in Red Square, expansive site of all those Cold War military parades next to the Kremlin. The leaders stood atop the Lenin Mausoleum, where since 1924 the Russians have never allowed the embalmed communist icon a decent burial. The show was closed for repairs, a good thing because lines are so long. Stalin reclined beside Lenin for a while, but was ousted to the Kremlin wall.
Those are the Tatars.
Onion-domed symbol of Russia, St. Basil's was built by the 8 times married Ivan the Terrible after his victory at Kazan. The domes were green at first, painted in an 18th century rehab. It's officially the Intercession Church. One chapel is over the grave of St. Vasily the Blessed, a holy fool who walked around naked and terrified even the tyrant Ivan with his thundering blather. The Kremlin on the Moskva River. Kremlin simply means walled fortress city, and Russia has several Kremlins. Moscow's first 14th century Kremlin defense walls against the Mongols were white limestone, replaced a century later with bricks painted red. Nikita Khrushchev opened the Kremlin to the public in 1955. Just outside the walls, a statue of Marshal Georgy Zhukov, Red Army hero of the unifying Great Patriotic War, Russia's name for World War II. 20 million Soviet citizens lost their lives. Soviet stones honor hero cities of that war, including Sevastopol, Minsk, Kiev, Murmansk, and the war's turning point at Stalingrad, now Volgograd. At the unknown soldier's eternal flame every hour, the precision changing of the guard.
It was Peter the Great.
Along the western wall, we entered the Kremlin through Kutafya Tower, one of 20 towers. Every morning when he's in town, Vladimir Putin, divorced father of 2 daughters, leaves his state residence at Novo-Orgorovo, 10 miles west. In his refurbished Soviet ZIL limousine, he drives through these gates to his office in the Kremlin's 1785 Senate building. Location of his windows? A state secret. And at night, the head of state, re-elected in March 2018, is escorted home by motorcade. Outside the arsenal, housing the Kremlin Guard, some of its 800 captured Napoleon cannon. Beside the 16th century Ivan the Great bell tower, for centuries the tallest structure in Moscow, the 1730 Tsar bell. The world's largest bell at 202 tons, it has never rung because a factory accident broke off a big chunk. Also never in action, the gigantic Tsar cannon, cast in 1586 for Fyodor I. On the Kremlin's Cathedral Square, the Assumption Cathedral, burial place of church patriarchs, scene of royal processions. Archangel Cathedral from 1333, where Ivan the Terrible and the other pre-Romanov Tsars are entombed. Royal coronations and weddings took place here for centuries. The Annunciation Cathedral, rich with frescoes, icons, and a very loud bell. The 19th century Grand Kremlin Palace, where Nicholas II stayed when in Moscow. Putin was inaugurated here in May 2018. The palace houses the Armory, a museum where you can see the royal crowns and dresses. No photographs allowed. Downtown, the State Duma, the compliant lower house of Russia's parliament, is controlled by Putin's United Russia Party. Just blocks away, the infamous Lubyanka, Stalin's KGB headquarters and the prison execution place for thousands. The building is still headquarters of the KGB's secret police successor, the Federal Security Bureau. Main government building, the Russian White House, a 1981 construction. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev works here. He loyally traded offices with Putin and was nominally president from 2008 to 2012. The Foreign Ministry, where Sergei Lavrov works, is one of Moscow's Seven Sisters, the Stalinist wedding cake landmarks. Moscow State University in the Sparrow Hills is the most famous Seventh Sister. It was football central for the 2018 World Cup, which opened and closed down the hill in the 81,000-seat Luzhniki Stadium. Vendors sold a lot of Zabivanka dolls and fur caps. Irma and I explored other parts of Moscow on a chilly, windy day. We saw the Ritz-Carlton, where Trump may or may not have viewed a certain obscene performance aimed at the Obamas. Was Vladimir Putin on the Ritz for Trump? The Ritz-Carlton is part of the oligarch's flashy Nouveau Riche Moscow, with Bentley, Ferrari, and Lamborghini showrooms. Mostly we observed the people's Moscow. This is best done along the Arbat, the city's main pedestrian promenade, a mile long with the Foreign Ministry at the far end. Fake Japanese cherry trees were out for the World Cup, and all Moscow, along with tourists, was contentedly cruising the street in the late spring weather. The Arbat is not all buskers and shopping. It has history, too. Pushkin and his wife, Natalia Goncharova, lived in this apartment block in the 1830s. Russia reveres its poets, as America no longer does, and someone had put a rose in Natalia's hand. Although you may discern that this Arbat fast food sign says Cinnabon, and this one says McDonald's, with Starbucks, you don't even have to try. In fact, in many places in Moscow, for example at an underground shopping mall near the Kremlin, Western consumer influence dominates. You can eat at Burger King, or at KFC, or at Subway, and then go out and ogle the devuchki, the young women, or the dudes on their hip single-wheelers. On pleasant Sundays, Muscovites throng Gorky Park along the Moskva River. We were staying at the Metropole, a block-square hotel in central Moscow. Built in 1905, steps from Red Square, the old pile has hosted the great singer Fyodor Chalyapin and other celebrities. The Metropole, with its ceramic Art Nouveau exterior panels, was the setting for a recent best-selling novel, A Gentleman in Moscow, by Amor Towles. The Bolsheviks sentenced Count Alexander Rostov to lifelong house arrest in the Metropole. He makes the best of it, becoming maitre d' of the beautiful restaurant, whose service he upgrades before he... Well, I won't give it away. On Theater Plaza, the Metropole faces the Bolshoi Theater. Opened in 1824, the Bolshoi premiered Swan Lake in 1877, Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker in 1919. Again, the few Bolshoi ballet tickets available were a bit pricey for our budget. Among Moscow monuments, the 1812 Napoleonic War Arch of Triumph on Kutuzov Avenue, the soaring Victory Monument to the World War II dead, with a Holocaust museum behind it. And here's an offbeat one, Moscow's only monument to Peter the Great, who built St. Petersburg to escape Moscow and its scheming boyar nobles. This modern monument was designed as a tribute to Christopher Columbus. It was repurposed to tell Peter, all is forgiven. A kind of monument to the socialist past is the former Red October chocolate factory. Red October still turns out some pretty good milk chocolate. Just past luxury apartments that were reserved for Soviet VIPs, the new Moscow, in the shape of a high-rise development called Moscow City. Trump's deal to buy a half interest in a hotel here fell apart. An overbuilding spree left this 80-story apartment shell empty, so some floors will be removed. A lot busier are a huge bookstore and a gambling casino. But if you want to share the throbbing soul of Moscow, go underground to ride Stalin's metro. He ordered the world's most artistic stations during the 1930s to give the proletariat some uplift amid Russia's breakneck industrialization. The stations were air raid shelters in the Great Patriotic War. For more of the past, go to Zamoskvorechye, the Across the River district. Count Tolstoy had this city house here, not far from the 16th century Novodevichy convent, where noble widows and daughters were sent into God's service. In Novodevichy Cemetery lie Khrushchev, Rostropovich, Chekhov, Stanislavsky, Eisenstein. Mama Duck and her brood were a gift to Novodevichy from U.S. First Lady Barbara Bush.
To the children of the Soviet Union.
At the Tretyakov Gallery, gift of a wealthy merchant and art patron, classic icons by the medieval master Andrei Rublev, and countless other masterworks of Russian art over the centuries. Near the Tretyakov, a Soviet apartment building just for favorites of the official writers' union. Boris Pasternak, known more as a poet than as a novelist, lived comfortably on the top 2 floors. A Moscow farewell dinner included in the tour price. It must have been. When we asked the waiter what kind of wine the red was, he answered, "Red." I'm no expert on Russia after a stay of only 5 days, but I take home admiration for her people. Conflicted about a turbulent past, feeling unwanted by the West, uncertain about turning eastward, but still living hopeful lives in a changing society.